Good. All right. Thank you for coming to our How to Study class with a lot of note-taking thrown in for fun. First thing I'd like to go over is just a short review of the topics we're going to cover tonight. The first one is why study. The second one is your study setup. Number 3, different learning styles. Number 4, study methods. And then finally, ACT, SAT prep review. Just a short one. So we'll start out with the difference between homework versus studying. Is there a difference? Of course. Homework is to, of course, finish up your leftover schoolwork, anything you didn't finish in class. And studying is time spent on one's own to review the material learned in class. The nice thing about studying is you have control over how much time you spend studying and how much to study at one time, which is less stressful than trying to cram everything through in one night. The nice thing about setting your own study hours is that you can start when you need to, and you can study a manageable chunk of work at a time. Okay, so then why do we study? Well, number 1, to find your strengths and weaknesses, find your abilities and skills, and then, of course, to find effective methods of study for yourself. All right, all of these are important. So we will be going over different methods of study, flashcards, reading, taking detailed notes. But before we go through those, we're going to go over study setup. So we have the 4 P's: be productive, be prepared, be purposeful, and be present. All right, so being productive, develop a develop a study time schedule, write down your daily and weekly schedules, and stick to your plan. So if you write down your daily and weekly, maybe even monthly schedules, and incorporate an hour of study into your day, you'll just have everything done, right? It's not necessary to study every subject every day, but by developing a schedule or a plan, it makes it harder to just procrastinate, and you know that there's an end time, which is different from cramming, as I mentioned before, which takes all night. So at this time, I'd like you to think of the class where you have the most trouble. Which one is it? Is it history, geometry, art history, math, foreign language? What I want you to do is write that class down and then use what you learned in this class and apply that to your most difficult class for the next month or even 2. That way you can measure your progress. So I'm having trouble in science, and this semester we're studying insects. So I looked through my schedule and I figured out that on Monday and Thursday I have an hour to study. Okay, so on Monday, I plan out, I'm going to read all the handouts that my teacher gave me. I'm going to look up a few things on websites, and I'm going to take notes from everything that I read to prepare for my next day's class. And then on Thursday, since we have a project coming up, I'm going to study for 1 hour. I'm going to use all my notes, answer all the handout questions, and prep a rough draft because apparently I have an essay due. All right. Let's see. So the next is being prepared. And being prepared includes gathering all of your study materials beforehand and not during your study period, okay? Because we don't want to waste our study period procrastinating. Okay, so what I want you to do is think ahead, what will you need? Write down what you'll need and have it ready. Okay, so study needs can be books, notes, pencil. Maybe you need to print out a website or some information. Maybe you need to get some handouts together. And of course, it's after school when I study, so I'm going to need a snack and some water. Okay, the next thing I want you to think about is being purposeful. And I want you to determine your study goals for each class. And I want you to set a goal for each class that you take and find your why. Each class needs to have a goal in mind. Otherwise, why even study? There's something to learn in each class, okay? You can read a chapter handouts, learn the material. You can learn a new concept, review class material, get to the next level. What do you want to do? It's important to know why you're studying for each particular class. Studies show that we work best when we aim for a goal. So what if your goal is a good grade? figure out what you need to get to that grade, and then work on it one chunk at a time. Maybe you need to understand a concept, right? So work on that, get some available resources. And sometimes those available resources include your teacher or tutors. Okay, so you know what you need to do. So I want you to think about it like this. Your goal is your motivation. It's a good idea to cultivate a goal for each class, because you're not going to like every class you take, or even every teacher. Have you ever run into this? I know I have. And so it can be difficult to stay motivated. So that goal is going to be your motivation. Okay. Tailor your plan for those weekly goals. So this semester, I would like to get an A. Okay. So in February, I'm going to memorize my classifications of insects, visit the Arizona Insect Museum, University of Arizona Insect Museum. They have some really gross insects in there. In March, I'll write up some notes for my insect essay, because it's a really big deal. It's like, 40% of my grade. In April, I'll write my essay. And then, of course, then after that, I'll study for my final. Okay. So when we talk about organizing, I like to use one of those small 3-ring binders per class, those skinny ones. It's easier to take out sections of notes for studying or writing a paper. It also allows for the big picture, because you can just take everything out and put it together on the floor, which is nice if you're a visual learner. If you only write on one side of the paper, you can use those for side-by-side comparisons. In your 3-ring binder, you're going to have your syllabus in front, and you're going to add in your handouts by dates, and of course, any additional news. So what is a syllabus? If you don't have one already, or if your teachers don't use them right now in high school, that'll definitely be used in college. A syllabus is a class timeline that's used for work when it's due, project, field trips, tests, etc. Okay, handouts are new or changing information, and then there's always going to be additional news, projects, class meetings, extra credit, group projects, and things of that nature. The last thing we want to talk about is being present. Find your quiet space and limit distractions. Think about where a peaceful place is for you. Is it your room, or is it the library? Anything that's fairly quiet, put a sign up if you need it, and turn your phone off. I don't know about any of you, but my room is not a very quiet space. I like it, but it's too distracting. There's too much going on. So sometimes the library is better, because you're out of your home environment and you're there for a purpose. So if that's you, think about using a library, whether it's the public library or even your school library. Okay. So before we start talking about note-taking and studying, we're going to talk about learning styles. I'm going to go over the 3 basic learning styles, which are visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Every study method presented will have an element that's suitable for each learning style. Okay, while I do this, I'd like you to just listen or read what's going on, and just figure out if you are 1 or 2, or maybe all 3 of these learning styles. Which one works for you? So the first one is visual. That's where we take it in and decipher information with our eyes. If we have reading and study the written words, we like those things. That's called visual linguistic learning. If you like to view charts, videos, or other visual elements, that's visual spatial learning. Visual learners study by using diagrams, writing down answers, practice turning visuals into words. They test in all formats and rewrite ideas into their own words or pictures. And sometimes it's great to either write or draw a story of what you're learning. Auditory learners rely primarily on their ears to take in and comprehend information, as opposed to their eyes. So in simple terms, this means that you have an easier time learning data and facts by listening to someone speak. So for an auditory learner, they like to study, to listen, to discuss, to ask questions, to retell spoken or heard information. It's good to discuss topics with others, explain or describe new ideas to others. Every time you repeat and discuss, your brain is retaining more information. You might find it helpful to summarize your notes and record and listen to them as another study tool. Kinesthetic learners use all of their senses, and they like to experience the learning process, okay, whether it's taking notes, highlighting book passages, or being otherwise engaged. So to study, it's good to try and use a hands-on approach by bringing in experience, using photographs, samples, even building with Legos, something 3D, Play-Doh, raid your 4-year-old sister's toy box, right, crafts. Kinesthetic learners, it's also good for you to put examples into your summaries and maybe even using objects to demonstrate ideas. Okay. So what's your learning style? Is it visual, auditory, kinesthetic, or a combination? So we're going over 3 methods of study: flashcards, reading, and note-taking. I want to remind you that each method of study can also double as note-taking and studying. Okay, oops, wrong way. There we go. The first one is flashcards, and I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with this. Flashcards are great for memorizing terms, concepts, vocabulary, or even putting together timelines. Use 3x5 or 4x6 index cards, highlighters or markers. Okay. Flashcards are great because they help you to remember the material. They encourage concentration, and they also record testable material. So if you're a visual learner, you're going to see it and write it, and it imprints onto your memory. If you're an auditory learner, as you write down your information, you're going to read it aloud, because that way you'll remember that information better. If you're kinesthetic, doing these 3 things, seeing, writing it down, talking aloud, and just the method of the card is tactile. So you're using all 3 learning processes. Okay, so our science topic is a tarantula hawk wasp. And so we're talking about the habitat. Tarantula hawk wasps are found in almost every continent in the United States. They are commonly found in Arizona and other southwestern deserts. In fact, tarantula hawk wasps are found wherever there are tarantulas. So, of course, on the front of your card, you're going to write tarantula hawk wasp and habitat in your title. And then the information on the backside: they live alone, they burrow into soil, they are found in Southwest or wherever tarantulas live. Okay, so that's the first one. Do you have any questions about flashcards? You've probably all been using them since 2nd grade, okay? Okay, so the next is reading. So reading encompasses any book that your teacher hands you that you need to read a chapter, any handouts, any web pages, any written material that your teacher wants you to study, take notes, get information from. Okay, so reading, we want you to read the assigned material before class or the lecture so that you can better recall and the material's familiar, and that gives you the ability to ask questions of your teacher. Okay, so if you're prepared, then when you go into class and you have questions, it's better to do that day rather than go home, read it after class, and you'll have to wait even another day to ask your teacher to answer your questions. Okay. So what we're going to do when we read is we are going to survey, we're going to answer the questions, we're going to take notes, and we're going to recite. All right, so reading survey. So that's us reviewing the chapter and the handout. Okay, either one. So when you're reading, you're going to glance through, note all the bolded paragraphs in your paper, in your book, okay, in the literature that you have. You're going to note the headlines, terms, and concepts, 3 to 6 core ideas, and then you're going to read through the chapter questions, okay? As you glance through, okay, that's going to help you organize all your ideas as you read through later. And we want you to read through the chapter questions to get the big picture. What does your teacher want you to learn from this reading, from this chapter, from this book, from this handout? Okay. So when we read, we're going to answer the question. So as we read through, we're going to turn each heading into a question, or use questions from the syllabus, or use the questions from the end of the chapter. If you recall, the last chunk of information from the tarantula hawk wasp read habitat, and it told about different habitats of tarantula hawk wasps. So if I were going to do that in real time, because I'm reading this article, instead of reading habitats, I would ask the question, where did tarantula hawk wasps live? So that means that when I'm searching for that information in a lengthy paragraph, it'll be easier for me to find. Okay, so then why ask questions? Doing this piques your brain's curiosity and increases comprehension. It demands that you find the answer to the question. So you'll definitely have in mind what you want to learn. Again, if you're reading about tarantula hawk wasps and habitats, if you ask yourself the question, where do tarantula hawk wasps live? As you read the paragraph, your brain is searching for that answer. Okay, so then after the material has been read through, it's time to take notes. So why do we read and take notes? Because the combination of reading then taking notes is key to retaining information. Scientific American wrote a few years ago, those who wrote out their notes by hand had a stronger conceptual understanding and were more successful in applying and integrating the material than those who took notes with their laptops. Okay, there's that brain, eye, hand concentration. Okay. Taking notes encourages concentration. Our memory fades quickly, and after lectures, research shows that we forget 50% of what we hear in an hour. Taking notes by hand forces us to slow down, our brain to think more, and we can only record as fast as our hand can write. So when we type, our brain is left out of the equation, okay? We don't have to pay attention. And especially if you have trouble paying attention, if you write by taking notes, then your brain has to be focused on the person who's talking or what you're reading. Okay. Why take notes? To record testable material. Students are expected to remember key facts or ideas and apply them. Tests are based on these ideas and concepts. So in essence, when you take notes, you're writing down the answers to your next test. Okay, reading, recite. So one way to do this is look away from the book and recite the answer in your own words. You can tell the story about the material. You can review your notes to get a bird's eye view of points and always check your memory. So as you speak, you're also listening to yourself, which is another form of learning. And you want to repeat that for every section, every chapter, every handout. So as you read and take notes, if you're a visual learner, you're going to read to intake information. You want to underline, write out your key phrases and ideas. If you're auditory, you want to read aloud and repeat those key phrases as you write them down. Okay, if you're a kinesthetic reader or learner, you'll use the above, and then maybe you'll want to draw timelines or pictures or build to illustrate information. I had a student who, through history, in her history class, she would make stick figures in all the margins, so she would remember who is what. I always thought that was a great idea. Okay. The three most popular methods of note-taking are outlining, the Cornell method, and mind mapping. Okay. Each method of note-taking provides a resource for every learning style. So we're going to go over outlining, the outlining method first. So as I'm sure most of you know, the outlining method uses that numbering alphabet system with the topic headings, that's first, then additional information, more information, and then you have your second topic heading with that information. And as you study, you'll use the reading recite method that we just talked about earlier. I like the outlining method as it's linear and it's easy to find topic sentences and ideas. So after you've finished taking notes in your class, it's always a good idea to go over your notes again and rewrite to keep the same topics together. By rewriting your notes, you'll have a further opportunity to remember the information. So if we're going to outline a tarantula hawk wasp and take notes based on our earlier paragraph, we would habitat would be our first topic, and then information, southwestern desert, more information wherever tarantulas are found. Homes, they burrow in the soil. They use the homes of other animals. And I added diet just for entertainment, the adult flower, nectar, pollen, fruit, and the larvae tarantulas. Okay. All right, so that is outlining method study ideas. Visual, you note the words and patterns. Auditory, as you write, you might tell yourself a story or teach someone else when you're finished. If you're kinesthetic, you're engaged in the process through writing. Maybe you'll draw pictures alongside the text. Maybe if you're studying insects, you'll have a little insect war with, little stick insect figures, right? Anything to keep it fun? Okay. And that is the end of our outlining method study ideas. Next, we're going on to the Cornell method, which was developed by Walter Pauk of Cornell University. It is a widely used system for recording, reviewing, and retaining material. It incorporates every learning style. As you see in the little picture over there, there's a main idea, key questions, title, and then summary. That's a little version of how it's set up. The Cornell notes have you prepare your note paper in a specific format, and JD will be, if he hasn't already, he will be emailing you a copy where to get that. Okay, so as we read and work through the study format together, you'll find that it incorporates every learning style method. So the setup is dividing your paper into sections. At the top, you have your title, and on the left, you'll have your key questions, and on the right, you have your notes, and at the bottom, you have your summary. Okay. Cornell wants you to summarize and rephrase facts and ideas presented, record definitions as stated or written, and be brief and edit everything as soon as possible. Cornell's setup is great for taking notes as you read through novels and books for different classes. Okay, so this is what it looks like. And you can use this on just regular notebook paper too. You've got your subject, your title at the top. On the left-hand side are the questions that you're going to ask. And the right-hand side are the notes that you're taking. Okay, and the bottom is your summary. So our topic is the tarantula hawk wasp, and this is what they look like. So the next section of the Cornell method is to record notes, and those are on the right-hand side of your paper. So we're going to write down what we know: southwestern desert, where tarantulas are found. They have no nests. They burrow in the soil or use homes of other animals. Adults eat flower, nectar, pollen, fruit, and the larvae eat tarantulas. Okay, these are your notes from either a lecture or reading. Okay, then on the left side of the paper for the Cornell method are your questions, right? So you're going to formulate the test question based on the recorded info that you already have, or on questions from the syllabus. Okay, you'll write those in that left-hand column, which is questions, or some refer to as recall clues. And your questions should focus on specific definitions and big ideas. Okay, so basically, first we take notes and organize if we need, and that's going to help you prepare to study. So as you're writing down these questions, as you're writing down your notes, the questions you want to ask yourself as well is, what did my teacher continually repeat? Are there any overlaps between what my teacher says and what's in the book or on the PowerPoint or on the website? If there's any overlap, then those are important ideas for you to write down and study and remember. Okay. So on the left side of my paper, I would write, where do tarantula hawk wasps live? What does an adult eat? What do the larvae eat? Okay. Oh, I did write this down. I want you to listen. It's very helpful as you take notes during a lecture. In college, professors will share information that's not in print or online, and that information could be on the next test or exam. Okay, so make sure when you're reading or listening, if there's any overlap, you want to glom onto that. If a teacher tells you something that's not anywhere else, it's just extra information, you definitely want to hold on to that as well. So if I look at my paper, we're going to have tarantula hawk wasp at the top. On the left-hand side are my clues or my questions, and the right-hand side is the information. Okay. That makes it easier to study because the next thing the Cornell method asks you to do is recite it. Asks you to explain your notes out loud in your own words, and the information should be triggered by test questions in the questions recall clues column. And this is, again, another way to retain information. A great way to recite is not only to yourself, but recite it to a friend, your parent, your sibling. Okay, that will help you retain more information, especially if you're an auditory learner. The purpose of the recitation is it improves learning, you have a better understanding, and easier memory recall. Okay, studies show that reciting aloud is a powerful technique for long-term memory. Reciting requires you to understand that information. Another way to recite information is to teach that idea or concept to someone else. Understanding the information improves your ability to retrieve it from your memory, and it's much better than reading silently to yourself. I don't know about you, but if I read silently to myself too much, or sometimes like my brain will just go over things, it'll correct things, and I won't always get the full understanding of what I'm reading. So especially when you're studying for a test or you're trying to get all your notes together for a paper, it's so much better to just, silently under your breath, read it aloud. The next thing Cornell asks us to do is, is to study. So along with reciting, we're going to cover up our notes to separate the clues from the record column, use the recall clues or questions to jog your memory and check your answers, right? It stimulates your memory and it gives you immediate feedback on how well you've learned the information. Okay, repeat it as often as needed. So you're just giving yourself a little mini quiz. So the next thing Cornell wants us to do is reflect. Think about the information you're learning. All right, what's your goal or purpose for this study period or even this class? If you're reading a book or you're in a chapter in the middle, of a section, or if you're like working through part of World War II or something of that nature, or for science, we're studying wasps, but at the same time, right here, this little portion about the tarantula hawk wasp, that's a subset of the wasp. So what about tarantula hawk wasps? What's the same as another wasp, or what's different? These are things that we want to think about. How do the main ideas of what I'm learning fit into the bigger picture of the topic? Okay, how do these new ideas fit into what I've already learned? Which ideas are clear? Ask yourself which ideas are confusing, and then go back and reread, refresh, ask your teacher to clarify. Okay, and any new questions, bring those up. Okay, and the next section is recapitulate. Use your own words to write a summary of this information. If you're a visual learner, you can write or draw a picture. If you're an auditory learner, maybe tell another person. If you're a kinesthetic learner, you could draw a picture or a comic strip. So this is the best test of how well you understand the information. Each and any of these ideas used during your study time will help facilitate the learning process. So at the bottom of the page, if you remember, was this open box and it says summarize notes, right? So that is just writing in our own words what I've learned. Okay, so I wrote tarantula hawk wasps are found in the southwestern desert and anywhere there might be food for their young tarantulas. While adult tarantula hawk wasps consume pollen, nectar, and fruit, the female wasp entraps and paralyzes the tarantula, using its body as a nursery and as food for its young. So study and review. A good guideline is to review by reciting nightly frequent brief sessions, review by reciting and not reading. Okay, so don't look at your paper unless you're stuck. All right, so the Cornell method would like you to review nightly or several times per week, as frequent brief sessions are more effective than cramming. All right. Our third method of study is mind mapping. Now, this is a simple technique for collecting information using diagrams. It mimics closely how our brains work, and it's an activity that is both analytical and artistic. And you've probably been doing this since third grade, maybe fifth grade. So mind mapping uses words, pictures, and symbols. It's good for nonlinear thinking students and teacher, and it helps to analyze, comprehend, synthesize, recall, and generate new ideas. Some teachers teach all over the place. Have you ever had that happen to you? Mind mapping is great for those teachers because you can just attach another picture or piece of information to the main idea at any time or anywhere. I like to divide my notebook paper in half or use an entirely separate piece of paper for each topic. Then when I need to study, I can rearrange my ideas or pictures either by writing everything out or cutting and pasting. And all of that is just another way to facilitate your learning process. So for mind mapping, you'd start in the middle of your blank page, writing or drawing the idea that you intend to develop, right? So then you develop the related subtopics around the central topic, connecting each of them to the center with a line, and then you repeat the same process for subtopics, generating lower level subtopics as you see fit, connecting each of those corresponding to the subtopic. All of those words, and it's just this. All right, so you have your tarantula hawk wasp, that's your big topic. Our subtopic is diet. And of course, the next topic, we had to divide that in two because the larvae and the adults eat two different things. So we attached larva to diet, and of course, tarantula to larva to diet, and then adult to diet, and then pollen, nectar, fruit to diet. Okay. It's nice and creative. You can use different colored pens. Depends on how much time you have during class, right? So as we mind map, we're effectively taking notes for ourselves. The purpose of studying is to retain information, and many of us retain information by telling stories or visualizing pictures. Mind mapping is yet another way to take notes and to study. All right, so that's the end of taking notes and studying. Please let me know if you have any questions. We're going to go over the SAT, ACT super quick. So in addition to studying for your classes at AZ College Planning, we encourage every student to study for the SAT and ACT. We like to use Khan Academy, khanacademy.org for SAT, and the SAT Blue Book app, which is now required because the SAT is now online. For ACT prep is academy.act.org. These are specific online prep programs, and we like these because they allow the student to set their own study schedule and, most importantly, to find why the answer is either correct or incorrect. Okay, so again, our topic is tarantula hawk wasps. So as we read through our writing portion of the SAT, we are going to read all the questions. We are going to read the passage. We're going to answer the question and find the correct answer. And the reason, if you remember, why we're going to read the questions first is because then when we read the passage, we are looking for that answer. Your brain already knows what to look for, okay? We are still working on tarantula hawk wasps. And reading all the questions are, preventative measures one can take include A, wasps are not aggressive, B, check all food and beverage containers, C, open doors and windows, and D, run away. So let's read the passage. Tarantula hawk wasps are not aggressive. Many pest experts recommend leaving them alone and taking preventative measures to keep wasps out of the home, including sealing all cracks and gaps in the structure, especially the foundation, keeping doors and windows shut, especially when eating or drinking outside. Check all foods and beverage containers before touching to ensure no wasps have landed on the food or drink. It is essential not to make any sudden movements when encountering a wasp and instead quietly leave until it has left the area. So now we're going to answer the questions. And we're going to do that. We're going to look for the wrong answers and omit them. So the process of elimination. So the question is, preventative measures one can take include wasps are not aggressive. I don't think that's a preventative measure. Check all food and beverage containers. That sounds like a preventative measure. Open doors and windows. I mean, if a door or window is open, then a wasp can come in. So maybe not that one. And then run away. You can't do that before you see a wasp, can you? All right, so we're going to find the correct answers, right? Read through the answers to see if yours is correct. Read through every answer, including the wrong answers. Just as important to know why the answer is correct, or it's just as important to know why the answer is incorrect, as it will help you discern correct answers to other questions. So remember, ours was B, and B is the correct answer. But let's go through all of them. So wasps are not aggressive is incorrect. The question was asked about preventative measures to take against wasps. A is a true statement. College Board loves to put in true statements to trick a student. So even though this is a true statement, it does not answer the question. Okay. Check all food and beverage containers is correct. It is a preventative measure you can take. Open doors and windows is incorrect. The passage states to close doors and windows. D, run away is incorrect. The passage reads, it is essential not to make sudden movements. Quietly leave until it has left the area. Okay. So again, your study sites for SAT prep, khanacademy.org, SAT Blue Book app, download that. For ACT prep, it's academy.act.org. Okay. And if you have any questions about SAT prep, please contact us at AZ College Planning. So let's review. So we talked about making a study plan. Make a study plan for each class. Study outside of your homework for one class for a month, then bump it up to 2 classes if needed, and so on. Okay, start with the class that's giving you a hard time. And in fact, maybe you started out with math and now you understand the concept, but now like you're having trouble in history. So then you can switch out math for history if you only have 1 hour a week. Okay, so it's yours. You can be flexible. Just make sure that you have incorporated that study hour into your week. So now it's automatic. It's like tying your shoes or brushing your teeth, and you'll just know that you need to do that every week. Okay, so make a learning goal for each class. It gives you something to work for. Okay, something to work toward. Make sure, because you're not going to like every class and you're not going to like every teacher. So this makes it easier. Be interactive. Read, take notes, ask questions. It's always good to read the information before class if you can. It's not always, you're not always able to do that in high school, but you'll definitely need to do that in college. Okay. The next thing is please communicate with your teachers. Keep open communication with your teachers. I think it's fairly easy in high school because most teachers want to help you do your best. But many times, especially if you're taking junior college classes during high school or college classes, their classes can be too large for a teacher to get to know each student. Help you and your teacher out, especially in college. My son was taking college algebra at the junior college when he was in high school, and he was doing pretty well for a while, and then he hit a concept and he was studying like crazy, but he just wasn't doing well on the test. He was just missing some crucial information. So his grades kept slipping and he was frustrated. And I encouraged him to talk to his teacher because honestly, his teachers can't tell the difference if you're studying and trying or if you don't care and you're just going to the class and taking the test. So by keeping that open communication, you can let your teacher know, hey, I'm having trouble and I need help. And that's what he did. One day after class, he said to his teacher, I'm not doing well. Here's what I'm studying. I know I'm missing something. Can I have some help? And his teacher said, oh yeah, I've got office hours. Let's go back there and do that. And so he met with his teacher probably twice a week for a month, and until he figured out what he was doing wrong, and then he was doing better. Okay, so make sure that you keep communicating with your teachers and let them know what's going on. Okay. And lastly, be on time to class because this shows respect for yourself, your teacher, and the learning process. Okay, and it's very important to do that. All right, and always be intentional. You have any questions? Let me know. Tell a friend about AZ College Planning. And we're finished. Have a great evening. Good night.